All right, good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting, the Transportation Committee meeting to order. Sorry about that. So welcome, everyone. As a reminder, this is also being streamed online virtually through Zoom for anyone who cannot attend to it today, and it's being recorded. So committee members, please remember to turn on the microphone when you're speaking, so everyone in the room and online can hear you. I'd like to go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves, including the table and then audience members and then online as well. So I'll start off. I'm Kevin Carrier, representing Lake County.
Good morning, Tara Orban representing Cook County.
Amy Lee, CMAP.
Christina Kupkowski, Will County.
Morning, Jackie Forbes, Kane County.
Heidi Lichtenberger, Kendall County.
Scott Hennings, McHenry County.
Jeff Schreiber, CDOT.
Audrey Wennick, Metropolitan Planning Council.
Tom Vanderwood, Northwest Indiana Regional Planning Commission.
Chris Hebert, Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission.
Todd Schmidt, Federal Highways.
Eric Llewellyn, Pace.
Lynette Civarella, Metro.
Mike Conley, CTA.
Jack Crook. Now IEPA.
Bob Zane, CNC.
Kyle Whitehead, RTA.
Karen Robles, Tollway.
Chris Snyder, DuPage County.
Chuck Abraham, IDOT OIPI. Steve Schilke, IDOT District 1.
Brandon Gaber, IDOT Office of Planning and Programming.
And Doug Ferguson, CMAP.
Great. And we'll go to the audience here. We'll pass the microphone around.
Terry Dixon, CMAP.
Martin Menninger, CMAP.
Heather Mullins, RTA.
Mike Clemens, Lake County DOT.
Eric Trinota, Northwest Council of Mayors.
Leslie Rower, South Suburban Mayors and Managers.
John Yonan, Collins Engineers.
Evan Hayes, CMAP.
Brittany Mattias, Southwest Conference of Mayors.
Jill Ziegler, Illinois Tollway.
Henry Geraro, Illinois Tollway.
Blanca Vella Schneider, CMAP.
Camadab, CMAP.
Sarah Stolpe, CMAP.
Russell Petrovic, CMAP.
It's the CMAP corner. Laura Wilkeson.
Kaja Hart.
John Carpenter, CMAP.
Ryan Tomto.
Stephanie Pfeiffer.
Jane Grover and
Victoria Barrett.
and Lindsay Bailey, CMAP.
All right, and then, Cam is going to read the online participants, please.
All right, we've got Amy McEwen, Bill Barnes, Clark Shoup Diggs, Craig Heather, Daniel Thomas, David Poe, David Tomzik, Elizabeth Ginsburg, Elizabeth Scott, someone identifying as an iPhone, Jamie Jackson, Jenny Vanna, Joe Surdam, John Hodsma, Carly Casado, Kurt Nika, Leroy Koss, Matt Novander, Matt Pasquini, Megan Swanson, Sarit Goyal, Suban A, and Tony Griep.
Awesome. Thank you, Kama. One little housekeeping thing, if you haven't done so already, on your way out or after the meeting, if you can go and sign in at the table, just so we have record of who was here today. All right, moving on to item 2.01, requests for agenda changes. I don't see any agenda changes here in front of me today, but do we have any announcements from committee members? All right, seeing none, moving on to 2.02, CMAP updates. Today, Amy is with us to provide an update for CMAP.
Right. Good morning, everyone. The reason why I have always liked Transportation Committee is it really kind of pulls this out from in front of our computers and really see what's going on in the region. So I just want to share some things with you. FHWA and CMAP, we had the pleasure of hosting FHWA Administrator Shaylin Bott, IDOT Secretary Osman, and former USDOT Secretary Ray LaHood, and other agency partners for a freight and passenger rail roundtable this week. While we had them on our home turf, we got to showcase some of our key regional projects, including the CREATE program and the Chicago Hub Improvement Program. These are not both just sort of shiny ball projects, right? These provide extensive benefits that advance mobility, efficiency, and safety across our region. So we're very proud to showcase that with them. Following the meeting, CMAP's Executive Director Alaman moderated a fireside chat with Administrator Bott at the WTS Central Region Conference, which I heard had really great turnout this year. During that fireside chat, they discussed how IIJA funding can advance equity, improve resilience to climate change, and promote economic mobility. Next, the music keeps on playing with the musical chairs that we have going on. John Donovan, as many of you know, has moved on from FHWA to IDOT as their Chief Operating Officer, so congratulations to him. We welcome former CMAPper Todd Schmidt, who will be representing FHWA until John's position is filled. We also welcome Karen Robles. She is the new Chief of Planning for the Tollway. This is her first week, so be kind to her. Congratulations to Karen. And then, as noted earlier, Jack Cruikshank, a familiar face, but now joins us in his new capacity at Illinois EPA. So we are very happy for that seat to be filled and to have that representation. But, you know, I'll keep you posted as the music keeps on playing for next time. All right. You know, in our industry, every season is award season. So congratulations to IDOT for receiving 2 awards from the Midwest chapter of AASHTO. The Jane Byrne Interchange was honored for the quality of life for transit, bike, pedestrian, and other mobility improvements category. And then the I-55 and Weber Road, the new diverging diamond interchange in Will County, that won in the technology and innovation category. So congratulations to IDOT. Hello, Shri Raj. An update on the Unified Work Program. As many of you know, we've been working over the past year to really refocus that committee and to improve that UWP development process. I think you'll know that we've been working on and we're committed to developing a strong core methodology to that program, as well as a comprehensive multi-year competitive program. A lot more similar to how we conduct the STP and CMAC committees. And so I'm really happy to announce that at the committee's September meeting, the UWP committee unanimously approved a new core methodology for the annual program. We also got some really good and helpful feedback related to the competitive program. So we'll be meeting with that committee in October to just sort of finalize that. And then finally, PART, as many of you know, last week, many of you joined us there too, for the joint CMAP and a CMAP board and MPO policy committee meeting, where we focused on the plan of action for regional transit and the report's recommendations. You know, from all of us at CMAP, we really want to thank you for all the time and energy that has gone into working with us to pull that report together. If there's anything that I think we can all confidently agree upon, it's that we will never agree on everything. And that's okay, right? What we, I think, need to demonstrate is that when something's important and hard, that we all stay at the table, because that we just don't see that happening as much as we need it to right now. So hopefully later today, Laura will give you an update on the next steps on that. But we all know that the harder discussions come after that report is issued. So we ask that you please all continue to stay at the table. Okay, with that, I'll turn things back over to the chair.
All right. Thank you, Amy, and welcome aboard or in your new roles for the new people. So looking forward to working with you. Moving on to minutes 3.01. We have before us a draft of the minutes from the July 28th meeting. So before we have a discussion or changes, I'll entertain a motion. Get it on the floor.
Motion, Brandon Gabriel.
Motion. Second.
Second, Tara Orban.
Tara. All right. Thank you. Any discussion or corrections or anything on the minutes? Seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right. Motion passes. Moving on, item 4.01, the tip amendment for 2023 through 2028, amendments and administrative modifications. Russell is here with us today to provide an update and overview on those.
Okay.
Morning, Russell.
Good afternoon. Included in your packet today is a memo detailing the 61 tip changes contained in formal tip amendment 23-11 and the 194 tip changes contained in administrative amendments 23-11.1 and 23-11.2. As seen in the memo, formal amendments resulted in an increase of 390.6 million in total project costs for all prior, current, and future years. This is the last tip change amendment for FFY 23. All total, this year, we did 528 formal changes and 1,172 administrative modifications for a nice round number of 1,700 tip changes this year. That's down a little bit from last year, as last year was the first year for IIJA. And now that a lot of the projects have been funded, now it's more about not adding new ones as much as it is taking the ones that are in the tip and then seeing them through the process. There are a few projects that I did want to highlight in the formal amendment, as nearly $245 million in competitive grant funding was added to the tip. The first project actually that's shown in the formal amendment added $19 million in infra grant. That's for grade separation, one of the great projects, GS9. The bulk of the increase, however, goes to the CTA, who added $200 million in competitive rail vehicle funds that were awarded. The tip ID on that one is 16-15-0005 and $25 million from a raise grant for their electric bus program. So good job, CTA. There's also another RSP that was on the formal amendment. That is the US 20 IDOT project. Tip ID is 0910-0030. That involves a lot of bridge work for which the cost has been increasing as the design gets finalized. So that's the bulk of the increase for that project. And there's also been additional increases related to a noise wall that is now being going through the final design process. Administrative amendments added $66 million to the tip in all prior, current, and future years. The net change for total costs in the tip from all amendments resulted in $456.6 million being added to the tip, again, in all prior, current, and future years. As shown in the memo, cost increases and project phases moving into and out of the tip comprise most of the formal changes. Administrative amendments were primarily AC and ACC changes, as they typically are, and cost changes below the threshold for a formal amendment. There was a few new projects related to TAP and ITAP projects coming into the tip and some schedule changes. The amendments, along with the memo, were posted on September 15th for committee and public review. Staff reviewed the financial impacts that the tip changes, both formal and administrative, had with respect to maintaining fiscal constraint, and can state that the tip is physically constrained as required. Approval of formal tip amendment 23-11 is requested at this time, and I can answer any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you, Russell. Before we get questions and stuff, we'll entertain a motion to approve tip amendment 23-11. All right, thank you. And second. Thank you very much. Although before we approve it, I guess, any questions for Russell? Discussion, Audrey?
Facility. That project, does anyone know what IDOT?
Yes,
Steve Schelke's here.
that's Harlem at I-55. Yeah, we're putting a whole new trail on the west side and then a sidewalk on the east.
So the bikes will be able to cross over the.
Yes.
Awesome, that's great. And then second question is project 0816-0024 on Butterfield Road next to the Hidden Lake Forest Preserve and Morton Arboretum, so road widening. Is there going to be any provision for bicycles to access those natural areas as part of that project?
Yes, we worked very closely with Butterfield Park District on the north and the Forest Preserve on the south. So yeah, that's 53-56 intersection, which has a lot of bike and ped accommodations to it.
Great, thank you.
And I will add, just in general, just for the committees, so that they know, and IDOT can second this. Almost all bridge projects now have to add bicycle accommodations or pedestrian accommodations if they didn't already have them. So it's common now that bridge projects, as they go through the being rehabilitated or replaced, are adding those accommodations. Almost all bridge projects do now.
Yeah, you can even look at the tip change for US 20. We're providing a path over the Fox River on an access control freeway.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, Kama's here with us today to talk about the new STP shared fund, CMAC carbon reduction, and TAP L programs for our consideration today. Good morning, Kama.
Good morning, everyone. As noted in the memo in your packet, the STP Project Selection Committee and the CMAC and TAP Project Selection Committee have both approved new federal fiscal year 2024 through 2028 programs to be funded with the shared fund, CMAC, carbon reduction, and local transportation alternatives. These programs include a total of 68 projects that were selected according to the selection methodologies from the 129 applications that were received in response to the joint call for projects in January. Draft programs were available for public comment from July 13th through August 11th and were discussed at both this committee as well as the Council of Mayors Executive Committee during the comment period. Only one public comment was received, and that was in support of the CMAC and CRP programs as proposed. Based on the nature of this comment, no changes were made to the draft programs. The programs approved by the project selection committees have been incorporated into TIP amendments 2401.1, 2401.2, and 2401.3. And today staff is requesting that the Transportation Committee approve those TIP amendments and recommend final approval to the CMAP Board and MPO Policy Committee.
Awesome, thank you, Kama. All right, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed CMAP, or excuse me, STP, CMAC, CRP, and TAP programs. And as Kama mentioned, that's going to go up for approval at MPO and for CMAP Board. Do I have a motion? So moved. Thank you. Second. Thank you much. Any questions, comments for Kama? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Kama.
Thank you.
All right. Here, wrong page. There we go. Jane's with us today. She'll present the draft public participation plan, which guides CMAP's public engagement and explain the next steps. So good morning, Jane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jane Grover, Principal at CMAP. You have in your packet the draft of the public participation plan that CMAP is required to produce and approve every 4 years. It is intended to not only just fulfill the federal requirements to have a public participation plan, but it's also intended to be a guide for CMAP staff, but also a guide for the public as to how to engage and where the levers are to influence CMAP. It has already been reviewed, a draft of this has already been reviewed back in June by the Regional Transportation Authority because this plan doubles as the RTA's public participation plan. And our Citizen Advisory Committee reviewed this in August as well. The draft you see now and the draft that's now out for public comment incorporates the feedback from the Citizen Advisory Committee and the RTA. So we seek your approval of this draft. We can bring it back to you as a final sometime later this year in early 2024. But because we've had a big agenda item that has squeezed out a lot of other agenda items in this last year, namely the Plan of Action for Regional Transit, I don't think this will get before our Metropolitan Planning or our MPO committee until January. It's meeting in January 2024. So it's out for public comment right now. Public comment ends October 6th. As of today, we have received no public comment on the draft public participation plan. So what's next is your review and I hope approval of this draft today. We will finalize this version. What you see here is a Word document. We expect that the final plan will be more designed and have some graphics to help people make it more accessible to folks. Our Citizen Advisory Committee, if it meets, if we have a quorum for its December meeting, will review the final version of it before it goes to the MPO Policy Committee in January. And I welcome your suggestions on how to improve this draft plan.
Great, thank you, Jane. I think a lot of us realize that coming out of 2020, there's a lot of changes that are necessitated for public involvement and stuff like that too, just with all the different tools and stuff at our disposal. So getting that on the floor, I got a motion to approve the public participation plan that we have in front of us.
So move Brandon Gaber.
Brandon, second.
Second, Kyle Whitehead.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions, comments, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Motion carries on that. Thank you, Jane. Appreciate it. All right, moving on to informational items today. Starting off with Heather Mullins is here with us today from the RTA. She's going to give us an update on the Section 5310 program and the recently approved program of projects being funded with those funds. So good morning, Heather.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Heather Mullins. I'm the division manager of our local planning and program management group at the RTA. And I'm here to provide an overview of our FY 2022 and 2023 Section 5310 program projects. Next slide. Okay, so the Section 5310 program is a federal formula grant program that provides assistance to public transportation projects that enhance mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. The RTA became the designated recipient for Section 5310 program with the Illinois Department of Transportation in 2013. And as a co-designated recipient of Section 5310, the RTA awards and administers operating, mobility management, and capital improvement projects, while IDOT awards and administers grants for paratransit vehicles. Next slide. The project selection for the program is guided by the Coordinated Public Transit Human Services Transportation Plan, or the HSTP, which was updated and adopted by the RTA in 2013. A locally developed HSTP identifies the transportation needs for individuals with disabilities, older adults, and people with low incomes, and provides strategies for meeting those local needs, and prioritizes transportation services and projects for funding and implementation. Next slide. The HSTP recommended 9 goals and strategies to meet the transportation needs of seniors and people with disabilities, all listed on this slide. Section 5310 projects must meet at least one of these goals, and several of our projects meet more than one. Projects in our recommended program meet goals number 1, which is establish mobility management and travel training networks. Goal 2, expand service areas and hours. And goal 8, establish a regional one-call, one-click service. Never loud enough. Thank you. Next slide. So this is an overview of the timeline for this year's call for projects. The call opened on March 22nd. Applications were due about 5 weeks later, April 21st. We had 2 meetings in May and June to provide the applicants an opportunity to give a presentation to our project selection team and allow some Q&A. We then prepared our recommended program of projects, which opened for a 30-day public comment period in July. We received just a handful of comments, all positive towards the program. And then on September 14th, we did present the recommended program to the board, and it was adopted. We do conduct a call for projects every other year, and it combines 2 years of funding, and the next call will likely be in 2025. Okay, next slide. All right, some overview of the funding for this year's call. It was higher than in previous years due to the increase in funding for this program as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. There's a total of $19.2 million in federal funding for the 2 years. That's about $6 million more than what was available during our last call for projects, which was at FY 2021. So of that $19.2 million, 5.5 went to IDOT for their vehicle procurements, and the RTA retained 13.7 for our operating, mobility management, and capital projects. Next slide. We received 15 applications for a total of 26 million, which means we were over programmed by about 13 million. The staff recommended 13 projects listed on this slide and on the following slide. Again, these were adopted by our board last week. Many of the projects in the program are current Section 5310 subrecipients for operating projects. So you might recognize some of these. Next slide. Oh, previous slide, sorry. There we go. Applications are recommended based on eligibility, needed funding, particularly for returning operating projects, project selection team scoring and ranking. And the project selection team includes representatives from IDOT, CMAP, Easter Seals, and the RTA. This is all federal funding with the subrecipients providing the required local match. We do have several new capital projects in the program this year, one for each of our service boards. For Metro, we're providing funding for ADA visual information signs. For the CTA, we're providing funding for tactile signage at bus stops. And for PACE, we're providing funding for the ADA paratransit and dial ride elements of their mobility as a service app. Next slide. We have officially notified all of our applicants, whether they're in the program or not. Our next step is to prepare the official application to submit to the FTA. And we assume we'll be able to issue grant agreements in first or second quarter of next year. Next slide. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Great, thank you, Heather. A lot of great information on that. Any questions for Heather? Yeah.
Hey, Heather, no questions. I think this is great. I just want to say as a member of the Project Selection Committee, I really appreciated your work and your colleagues' work. I'm especially interested in the PACE Award that's looking at building out app and mobility as a service there. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'm excited to see what happens with that. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. We appreciate your participation.
Any other questions? Yes.
So going back to the HSTP, it seems like it's been a while since it's been updated. Do you feel that the goals identified within that HSTP are still reflective today and that these projects can still address those?
Yeah, so we updated that in 2021. We're required to update it every 4 or 5 years. So we're probably due for an update in about another year or so. So I think we're kind of on the cusp where I think the goals were still represented in the projects that were submitted, but I do think it's time for an update, and we're probably going to start that process next year.
All right, thank you. I thought I heard you say it was last updated in 2013, so that's totally
no,
different.
that is old. We would be out of compliance.
Thank you very much.
Great. Anything else for Heather today? Awesome. All right. Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. Appreciate the update. All right. Vicky is here. Vicky Barrett's here to discuss the region's federal safety targets for highways. Good morning, Vicky.
No, there we go. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about our roadway safety targets methods going forward. We've had a couple questions from the committee and our partners about what we plan to do with this. So today I won't be talking about our actual targets or our progress towards meeting them, but more talking about what we plan to do in the future with our upcoming safety work. So if you go to the next slide, wonderful. Just a quick overview of our safety target setting program. The safety targets are one of a few federal performance measures that we report on. There are many performance measures, including bridge condition, pavement condition, all of those kinds of things. The safety targets are really the key indicator for the FHWA's Highway Safety Improvement Program. So that's the largest federal program for highway safety and has a mission of reducing traffic fatalities and serious injuries on our roadway network. MPOs, IDOT has long reported on targets, identified targets for reducing roadway fatalities. The requirement for MPOs began with the MAP 21 federal authorization legislation, which really took effect in 2018. MPOs were required to identify targets starting in 2018, and I'm going to talk a little bit about those methods, but in general, they're set annually, these safety targets. The state DOTs are required to report them with their HSIP annual report at the end of August, and MPOs have, I think, 180 days or so after that to report, to identify targets. So here's the process that we've generally followed. We received the targets from IDOT for the state in September, which we just received. We bring them to various committees, first starting with our Transportation Technology and Operations Coalition in November. Then we bring our targets to this committee in December for approval. and then move on with our approval from the MPO board and the MPO and board in January. There are 5 safety targets that are identified that are required federally. One is the number of fatalities. The second is the rate of fatalities per vehicle mile traveled. The third one is the number of serious injuries. The fourth, the rate of serious injuries per vehicle mile traveled. And finally, the fifth one is the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries collectively. So since we have had this mandate in 2018, we have chosen to support IDOT's targets. MPOs have the option of supporting state targets or identifying their own regional targets. Most MPOs, in fact, we haven't found an example of one that doesn't, supports the state targets to this point. The FHWA recently completed a state of the practice report, and there's some emerging practices and targets, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but most MPOs support state targets. Oh, I also wanted to mention that CMAP has identified a goal, a Vision Zero goal in our Onto 2050 plan, which I just wanted to note is slightly separate from our FHWA target setting practices. And here's an example of a recently presented target to this committee. This is from last December, identifying the target for 2023. There are various methods used to determine targets. This is IDOT's target using a 2% policy-based reduction. I'm going to talk about the methods in a minute. The next slide will show a target for serious injuries, which is based on a trend line method. So those are 2 different methods of identifying targets for different types of measures, and they vary according to which the trends are. So IDOT always selects the most aggressive target, which we are in alignment with. So what we'd like to do going forward is identify regional safety targets. We have, at this point, since the beginning of our sort of more robust safety program, more agency safety work in progress, which always includes careful metrics and evaluation measures. So we're excited to put those to work. We're also encouraged by our federal partners to identify regional targets. And we have been told to focus on ones that are data-driven and really inform a work plan. And just to note that IDOT will continue to identify state targets. So as I started to allude to, there are challenges in setting targets. There is no consensus on what the best methodology here is. Some people do a policy-based just 2% reduction like IDOT does for some of its targets. These are considered somewhat aspirational targets, not necessarily based on work being completed, but what the hopes of the program are. Trend line is another method. There are also statistical and probabilistic methods out there where people link, the most correlated factors in traffic safety. So sometimes, well, for a long time, that was vehicle miles traveled, and then COVID kind of blew up that model when vehicle miles traveled dropped and fatalities went up. So there's a couple different methods out there. In the end, data-driven targets are really tricky. Safety is very complex. It includes not only infrastructure improvements, but changes in laws and policies, enforcement activities, educational training programs, in addition to travel demand. So creating data-driven targets can be a challenge. And on the next slide, I'm going to talk about what we see as a real opportunity for CMAP to be a national leader on how we set targets. You're all aware that we received the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant to do safety action plans at the county level across the region. We'll be spending the next 2 years doing very, robust engagement and detailed analysis on safety issues and opportunities in the region. And a key focus of these safety action plans is a robust reporting requirement. So each of these safety action plans will include metrics for measuring progress. They will identify targets for reducing traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And our goal is to align the work of these safety plans with our target setting methods so that we can use the outcomes of these very robust safety action plans to inform our regional targets. We see this as an opportunity to not just identify targets that include all aspects of safety and are in touch with all of our local partners, but also as a way to really give a good feedback loop on implementation of these safety action plans. So if we keep our eyes on the work that's needed to achieve these fatalities, we can return to the safety action plans and find out what's needed to be done next. So our recommendations for target setting going forward is to make a plan to set regional targets when our Safe Streets and Roads for All action plans are complete and we have robust work plans associated with the reduction of traffic fatalities and serious injuries. The good news is this is also going to be in alignment with our next long-range transportation plan. So we will also be able to identify funding priorities associated with safety in our long-range transportation plan, which is expected in 2026. We want these targets to reflect our agency commitment to improving traffic safety, relate to the work needed to be done to achieve it. And then, as I mentioned earlier, really look at safety comprehensively and beyond just the infrastructure piece. So with that in mind, we expect to support state targets for the next couple of years while we continue to complete the safety action plans and the targets associated with those. And as always, continue our safety work robustly so that we are working towards our own internal goal of eliminating traffic deaths by 2050. So I will be back here in December to present the 2024 safety targets for your approval. As I mentioned, we will continue our work on STAR and the Safe Streets and Roads for All program and report that regularly and develop a method that we find to be potentially nationally innovative on setting safety targets at the regional level. I'm happy to take questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I have a comment, really more than a question. Thank you for coming and bringing this to us at this meeting. As you mentioned, in December, you'll be coming with the goals. And in the past, the goals have sort of come and then we've had the discussion at that point. And I appreciate CMAP jumping in here and saying, okay, you guys are interested. We'll bring this up early with you. And you did. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, go ahead.
This is something I had some questions about last year when we brought it up. It's this idea of why do we have the 2050 goal of 0 while we're saying that our goal is that we're only going to kill 1,087 people. I know that's terrible framing, right? You can all be mad at me for that. That's fine. But I would support this committee looking at going to more of a vision 0 for this purpose. And again, I get that this is a committee. If I'm the only one, that's fine, but I wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
Great. Kyle? Yeah.
This is exciting and important work, so thank you. I'm curious how much overlap you see with some of the regional transit goals as well, and how that might factor into the safety action plans and even this target setting process. I'm thinking, for example, like the potential for a county plan to prioritize a bus corridor on a busy arterial, right? Improve sidewalk access near transit stops and stations. Do you see opportunities for that type of prioritization of transit locations through this process?
Yeah, I do. Thankfully, the mandate for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program is to improve mobility for vulnerable roadway users. So we see a huge opportunity in these plans to make transit more accessible. There's also the accessibility component for ADA compliance component of that. But we really see this as an opportunity to expand mobility and improve safety for all road users, with a key focus on the most vulnerable road users that we have.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you, Vicki, for that presentation. So first of all, excitement to working with the CMAP team on the development of, county targets and, actions to achieve them. I think that's a wonderful idea, because each of our counties, have different characteristics, and each roadway typology going from like a dense urban environment to suburban to rural, you have a different toolbox to improve safety, right? Different issues, different action items. So, that's what we're looking to achieve with that plan is in strong alignment as an implementer with, what we're going to be able to do to help reduce, fatalities and serious injuries. I just had a question about the action, just a timing perspective. I know you're going to come back here in December, and I believe the plan is being procured, right? So what are we looking at in terms of the horizon with, seeing deliverables from that plan to, us we're obligated to do the safety targets in December?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and timing's important. So for the reasons that we will be completing the safety action plans within the 24-month federal requirement. So that's kind of the timeline that they're asking people to finish this work. The reasons for that are many, including, the urgency of the work needed, but also at the moment, the Safe Streets and Roads for All program is allocated funding for 5 years. So we also want to get people into the next, we want them to be able to apply to the implementation pot of money before 2026 or by 2026. So there's a couple reasons that those plans will be done in the next 2 years. And for that reason, we expect to be supporting IDOT's targets in the interim until those plans are at or near completion where they have identified targets. So it's more like we're staying in kind of a holding pattern of what we've previously done while we wait for that work to develop to the point where we can really pick it up and leverage it for improved target setting. So in December of this year, we'll be back with supporting IDOT's targets and potentially the following December as well. And then the hope is that maybe by the end of the next phase, we will be moving towards a regional target that's informed by the work in those plans.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also interested too in there's such a lag, right? You were able to show on the one slide on the safety data where we're looking at 2021, I think is the most recent, right? So there's always this lag between reported data and then, there's projects that capital projects, right? That my agency is planning now that we won't be turning dirt for 5 years.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, in terms of, what we're looking to achieve, I think we also have to look at the low hanging fruit, what we can implement in the near term versus, most of these projects, if they require a tip, take 5 to 10 years to truly implement. And so there's such a lag, that we have between, identifying plans and action items to really being able to achieve results. So I look forward to future discussions with this committee and with CMAP as well on that issue. Thank you.
Yeah, just adding on to that, I had a similar question on the regional targets, which you answered, but I agree with you, Tara, that even if we make policy changes, right, here and say, hey, we're going to do this, or we're going to create a new program or put funding at safety, federal process, I mean, it's going to take 5+ years, 7 years before we start seeing that nose down, hopefully, right, in the targets and stuff. So those are great points, Tara. I appreciate it. Yeah, another question or comment over here.
Thank you, Tara, for asking my question, and thank you, Vicky, for answering that question. But if you want to unpack it a little bit, I have a question about how mode agnostic the transition from the plan to targets. In other words, are you going to be dedicating an action plan only for the highways, or is it going to be neutral across the system? And another point, if I can make, I remember reading somewhere that it is not safety. Safety is an absolute target, which I totally support, but safe for is always a goal to shoot for.
Yes.
In a way. So if you can answer my question about the mode choices that you can attend to.
The targets are system-wide, so they apply to all roadways under all jurisdictions and all modes of travel. So they really are global. And we will, and they're important measures. And I think from the federal government's, perspective, it's important to know how HSIP is delivering, impacts. But we will be including some other metrics in the safety action plans that are a little bit more nuanced, that might give a little bit more, a quicker feedback loop on what's being improved, like the number of protected bike lanes that are being built as a result of it, or other things that we know improve safety, that we can measure more quickly than some of these larger infrastructure projects that take years and years.
Thank you, PS. Yeah, Chris.
So what Tara said kind of reminded me of some discussions we've had with the feds and others, and that is, the HIS funding and safety funding, we're always looking backwards. We're trying to solve something that happened 3 to 5 years ago because the data is outdated. Rather than looking forward and being proactive to identify the potential for corridors to improve the accidents before they happen. So in any of the stuff you're working on, are there any models that you look at that would predict that given a local agency's program, here's what we're doing? We know if you had a left turn lane that is at an intersection, you're going to address turning accidents 50%, right? And so is there anything that can give us some sense that what we're doing looking forward is actually going to be better?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I feel like safety is really just moving into that space right now. And the safe system approach really asks us to look at risk factors in addition to crash histories. So when you identify locations with a number of risk factors that are creating the safety issues that you've observed, what are those what qualities does that intersection have with other intersections, similar volume, similar size, similar signal controls, so that we can apply those same treatments to intersections that haven't yet experienced the crashes, but have the same conditions. So there's a number of methodologies used for this predictive analysis, but it is definitely at the core of the safety work.
All right. Yes. Oh, sorry, Audrey. Yeah, Lynette, then Audrey.
Sure. So Vicky, thank you for the presentation. We are excited to be working with you on this project. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rail Safety Week is going on right now. And one of the big challenges we have at Metra is the grade crossing and grade crossing accidents and incidents across the region. So we're hoping that partnering with CMAP and the counties, that we'll be able to come up with some proactive plans and look at where our biggest issues might be and how we can possibly get those into a program for improvements, partnering with the counties and the communities.
Yes, thank you. We're excited to work with you on that too.
Audrey.
Yeah, hi. Also very excited about this and look forward to being engaged on it. I'm just cognizant that we do have also state efforts such as the Strategic Highway Safety Plan that goes on at the state level and is federally required. And we haven't really talked about that in this forum, as well as just the methods for the HSIP program, which I assume will be intersecting with these efforts. And I wonder if we'll be looking at any of those, given that about half the fatalities happen in our region and affect all the state outcomes. Just wondering how those will intersect and if we'll be intending to potentially impact those methods or increase evaluation of all that, the HSIP funded projects, for example, are those giving us the outcomes we want, for example?
Yeah. The hope is that the robustness of the engagement and the safety analysis and the identification of programs that we do through these safety action plans give us the information we need to seek changes at all levels. So whether those are state laws and state policies, local ordinances, federal funding programs, how can we engage on those to adjust them? Many of those programs we described are federally guided with federal rules in place, but as a region, I think we would be well positioned to affect change on that level.
Great. Any other questions, comments? All right. See none. Thank you, Vicky. Appreciate it. And thank you, CMAP, for all your efforts on that. It's a very important topic. Moving on to 5.03. Ryan's here to give us an update and plan of attack for the regionally significant projects for the next regional long-range plan. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. Yeah, so I'm here today to talk a bit about our upcoming work to update policies and procedures relating to the selection of regionally significant projects in preparation for our next long-range plan update. So you can see here on this slide, the federal definition of regionally significant project, and bear with me, I know this is kind of long, but regionally significant project means a transportation project other than exempt projects that is on a facility which serves regional transportation needs. So things such as access to and from the area outside of the region, major activity centers within the region, major planned developments such as new retail malls, sports complexes, et cetera, or transportation terminals, as well as most terminals themselves, and would normally be included in the modeling of a metropolitan area's transportation network, including at a minimum, all principal arterial highways and all fixed guideway transit facilities that offer an alternative to regional highway travel. So essentially what this is saying is that RSPs are projects of a certain size and scope that they could have an impact on how the regional transportation network functions. So federal regulations go on to include 3 key provisions for an MPO's role in selecting RSPs. These include that MPOs must establish specific thresholds or factors that a project must meet to be considered regionally significant. The regulations cite specific examples of thresholds, including things such as project size, scope, cost, potential impacts, and alignment with regional goals and priorities. MPOs must also establish a process by which regionally significant projects are identified and selected within the metropolitan transportation planning process. This typically involves developing a call for candidate projects and establishing screening and evaluation criteria to prioritize projects to be included on the constrained list of RSPs. In the third provision, MPOs must document and report on the selection process, as well as the performance of regionally significant projects to ensure transparency and inform future decision-making. So before we go to the next slide, I want to just take a minute to kind of ground ourselves and how RSPs fit into the overall metropolitan transportation planning and programming process. One of the core purposes of the long-range plan is to establish regional priorities for transportation funding. Plan development begins with establishing regional goals and selecting performance measures to measure our progress towards meeting those goals. Next, information on existing conditions is collected and analyzed. And then after that, we look forward and try to forecast what the region's future needs will be. Federal regulations require us to look out for at least a 20-year planning horizon. Next, strategies are developed to address the existing and future challenges and opportunities that have been identified through that process. So during this process, a financial plan is developed. This plan forecasts reasonably expected revenues. This helps us to identify how much funding we think will be available over the plan horizon to fund strategies that have been developed. So this is where RSPs come in. The next step of the process is to select the projects that will implement the strategies developed earlier in the planning process. Federal regulations require that the list of projects be constrained by the amount of reasonably expected revenues that were identified in the financial plan. The process to select RSPs is meant to make sure that projects selected represent investments that will have the most positive impact in terms of achieving regional goals. So this brings us back to these 3 key provisions. Through this process, we need to make sure that we establish a definition, thresholds, selection, and performance reporting processes that will identify projects that warrant deeper analysis of the impacts they will have on the transportation network, as well as neighboring communities, as well as as well as for how well they will advance regional goals. Next slide, please. So on this slide, this shows CMAP's current definition for an RSP. Candidate projects must meet one of the following 2 thresholds to be considered for an RSP. They must cost at least $100 million in either A, change capacity on the national highway system, or as a new expressway or principal arterial, or B, change capacity on transit services with some separate rights of way or shared right of way where transit has priority over other traffic. And so the other threshold is that for projects that aren't adding capacity, they must cost at least $250 million and improve the state of good repair for a particular highway or transit facility. Next slide, please. So to ensure larger regions like ours are following federal regulations and fulfilling our core responsibilities, the United States Department of Transportation comes in every 3 to 4 years to evaluate our performance. This evaluation is referred to as a certification review. CMAP's last review was last year, and it found we were doing very well in fulfilling our responsibilities. However, they did include a few recommendations for how performance could be improved. One of the recommendations is quoted here on this slide. It reads, "The goal for RSPs should be to provide for a reasonably sized universe of projects to be considered and allow the plan to identify and prioritize the most critical projects in the region and focus resources on accomplishing them." So essentially, this recommendation is asking us to revisit our thresholds so that we are analyzing a greater number of projects through the RSP selection process and identifying which of them are the highest priority in terms of achieving our regional goals. Next slide, please. So to act on this recommendation, and as we gear up for our next long-range plan, CMAP will be working to update the region's RSP policies and processes. This includes finalizing the transportation project analysis tool that is being developed to evaluate RSPs. Martin has shared our progress on that here several times, I believe. We're also working to conduct background research that involves looking to our peers across other MPOs to see how they define RSPs and what thresholds they've established, and then trying to elevate what we think might be best practices from that. In addition, in the coming weeks, CMAP will begin reaching out to all of you and other regional partners to solicit members for a resource group that will help guide updates to RSP policies and processes. The aim is to convene a resource group with a diverse array of perspectives, including transportation implementers who can share their experience navigating CMAP's existing policies and processes and can provide insights into how these changes might impact their work. It is anticipated this group will meet regularly throughout the remainder of 2023 and then into 2024. During this time, CMAP committees will also be engaged, and any recommendations that come out of this will still flow through this committee before going on to the MPO Policy Committee and Board for approval. But ultimately, the objective of this work is to be sure that we're serving the region by bolstering our due diligence of the impacts of transportation projects that have on our regional system, as well as the communities that neighbor that system, and creating a clearer, more predictable and transparent process for the region to come together to prioritize these projects that are significant to the region and for the funding that we anticipate will be available for them. The last slide here just includes my email. I'm happy to take questions now, but also feel free to reach out to me at any time afterwards as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian, for the presentation. Any discussion, questions? All right, yeah, go ahead.
You've heard this before, but on the identification and selection piece with evaluation, we're very interested in improving the methods for calculating the greenhouse gas emissions impacts of projects, which we don't think the current method does very well. Do you intend to have that be one of the improvements to evaluation that is being considered here?
Yeah, it's not part of our RSP work specifically, but we do have another project underway right now that we're looking into, making sure we understand exactly how we're addressing that now, and then looking to understand if there are ways how we might be able to improve that. So that work is meant to be complete and be able to help feed into this process.
From this, okay.
So that it would be part of the next plan. Thank you.
Yes.
Strong endorsement of Bob's comment there. Excited to see the results of that. Just a couple comments as it relates to transit projects. I think the region has really ambitious goals in terms of transit ridership and reducing transportation emissions, and we're not currently on track to meet those goals. We're actually going in the opposite direction. So I think that should just be top of mind as we're thinking about the RSP process revisions and how we can reprioritize around transit if we are truly trying to meet the goals in the plan. I think a key part of that is better evaluating highway and transit projects and how they impact emissions, to Bob's point. So hope we can have more discussion on that. And then also, I think it's important to focus on the last piece that was mentioned in the recommendation there, which is focusing resources on the list. I know that there are some RSPs that have been on the list for a long time and rate very, very well and are not advancing at all. So I think the resource group should discuss why is that happening? What can CMAP do? What can we as a region do? If we've identified these projects as core to our regional goals, we should be doing more to try to advance them.
Thank you.
All right, sorry about that, Audrey.
Sure, just a question about the transportation project analysis tool. Will that be able to handle all modes of projects? I know sometimes our tools struggle with non-motorized projects and then that disadvantages them. So I just want to just raise that, maybe that's something for a future meeting of how we make sure our tools can handle all the types of projects we need to meet our goals.
Yeah, that's definitely something that the resource group discusses. The TPAT tool is more focused on things that can be modeled. So things that aren't able to be incorporated into our transportation model are more difficult. So we have to figure out what do we do in that situation. But that's definitely a topic for conversation with the resource group.
Great. Anyone else? Yeah.
Can I ask one more? Yeah, I was trying to fully understand the quote from the certification review, which you put on the screen here and also in the packet. When it said a reasonably sized universe of projects, you taking that to mean a smaller list or a larger list than what you currently have, or that the current list is about right?
I think and I would be happy for FHWA or FTA reps to provide additional clarification, but I think what we heard through, I mean, I just pulled the quote, but there is more information in there, and we did have conversations about this following the draft review. But essentially, what's happening right now is our threshold is so high that we're only really looking at those big, mega kind of size projects. And what happens is we're not really having a line of sight to anything that falls beneath that. And so what they're saying is that whole universe of projects underneath the threshold is very large, and there's no regional effort to coordinate around which of those are actually a priority and what kind of impacts are they having on our system and on the neighboring communities. And so the idea is they want to see that threshold be brought down to a scale that kind of pulls in more of those projects so that we can focus in to create a more consolidated list of projects within that constrained list that really addresses the regional priorities and needs.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Yeah, Michael.
So thank you. This is all good food for thought, and I want to go back to the two comments about greenhouse gas emissions and potentially ensuring that gets included in the process. I also want to make sure that I understand. Right now, there is no incentive or disincentive to promote or not promote projects in the regionally significant program, because our air quality is all handled by a different methodology and a different analysis tool. We have a budget for air quality here. And there's no, right now, unless I'm wrong, there's no link between the list of regionally significant projects and the air quality budget. Or is there? Is there a causality?
I don't know, Russ wants to answer this, yeah.
In other words, you may have a regionally significant project, but it won't make it into the list of, it won't make it into the tip as a real project unless it meets the air quality budget, yes?
So these things are complicated. They're not easily,
That's why I'm asking.
I will try to boil it down to some smaller bits that we can all chew on. All projects that are regionally significant, with the exception maybe of some transit maintenance type projects, are included in our conformity analysis. They have, when we look at, so the long range plan gets conformed, not just the tip. So the long range plan goes out to 2050. Some of the RSPs don't have completion years until much later into the planning process, 2030, 2035. So we have different horizon years, and 2035, 2040, and 2050 are some of the latter horizon years. In some of the projects that are RSPs do not have completion years until one of those horizon years. So that improvement is then included in our conformity analysis when the implementer has said it's likely to be open to traffic So not in the early times of the plan or conformity, which is, our budget is developed based on current monitors. But in the future, and in the future, we do show that emissions go down dramatically. In large part, that's due to technological advances in cars and trucks and things of that nature. And just keep, they're just better off in terms of their emissions profile. But all projects that are regionally significant that are on the highway side, I think I can speak with pretty good certainty, are part of our conform network. And I would be surprised if there wasn't one that's not considered to be part of our conformity analysis. Like I said, there could be a few transit ones that maybe aren't, buying new buses per se, doesn't necessarily change capacity and travel behavior. So there's nothing to model per se in that. It's just a better experience for the users, and it's a better bus, but it doesn't necessarily change how many people use it or change how it would affect emissions in terms of travel behavior. It'll affect emissions in terms of how the bus generates emissions, and that's a different kind of part of the process.
Thank you.
Does that help at all?
It's actually very helpful. It is a complex process, but they are two separate processes. And in part, I wanted to really respond to what you guys are suggesting, that greenhouse gas have a stronger role in selection or direction for the regional significant set of projects.
Yeah, I will say, just speaking off the cuff here, greenhouse gas at the project level is a very difficult type of analysis. Greenhouse gases are not like NOx or some other stuff that is more locally generated. So on some level, it's the cumulative impacts, both over time and geographically, that are also important for GHG analysis.
Yep. It's not simple at all, but thank you. Thank you for the response. Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate it. All right, I think we had a question down here. Comment? No, good. Anyone else? I had a quick one for you, Ryan. Kind of a comment, I guess, or a question, but is part of the process going to look at like a peer analysis? It may be helpful too if we're going to look at other MPOs, what other people are doing in terms of, their levels, types of projects and things like that, just to get some ideas from at least, or things like that. But
Yeah, that research is underway right now.
Yep.
And we'll have that for the first resource group meeting.
Great. All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, moving on to 5.04. Laura's here to talk about PART, which I don't know what that is. Do you know anyone know what PART is? So the PART plan has been updated with input from the CMAP board and MPO policy committee. So Laura's back to give us an update on where we stand.
Great. No slides today, guys. You've seen all the slides. Hopefully you've read all 120, I think 9 pages of the report. So I just wanted to provide some updates, some next steps, and then be able to address any questions that you have. As you know, we released the draft report in order for the board and MPO in September to review that. And we are currently in the stage of receiving any additional comments or edits from the board and MPO members. So if they have thoughts that they want to provide to us, we had asked that they be provided by today. So we're hopeful to continue that dialogue and have started to receive some as well. We are working then to make any of those edits or adjustments that we need to before we resubmit to the board and MPO on October 4th for a week of deliberation and reading before the October 11th meeting. We will be submitting edits to both the report and the resolution for that upcoming submittal. So I want to talk a little bit some of the things that we already heard that we know we're going to be making adjustments to, so that I can provide a little of that to you. We heard both before the board and after about the state of good repair needs and making sure that while the legislation actually asked us to address the operational needs of the transit system, that there is significant state of good repair needs, and that we really recognize that in a stronger way in the report. And as we've talked about that here in this group and in our 2050 plan, that's something that we've been wanting to focus on. We will make sure that we add additional language to address that as well. We also had worked on scenario packages as we talked to you, but as we've moved through the report itself, really focusing really on that transformational investment of 1.5, really being strengthening the focus of that in the legislation. I think the key thing about having the other package recognized in there is really to make sure that as we have additional conversations with the legislature, that they understand that if they do not fully fund that larger package, that they don't get all of the system improvements, right? So I think that we'll try to make sure that we really massage that framework, that there are trade-offs, that if you don't fund things, you don't get certain improvements, and how they might be able to approach that. So we'll make sure that we spend some more time focusing on that framing. The other thing that we heard is about drawing stronger connections. Again, I think we had, as we've gone through the report, had these in 3 buckets. And then as you read the full report and come from a different direction of looking at it, really making sure that we have stronger connections between the system improvements, funding, and what our governance recommendations are. So we want to make sure that we pull those things through. The other thing that we heard about within the how to implement it section is that there's a lot of questions about what the next steps are, and having more clarification on how some of those things would be addressed, specifically, debt, pension obligations, labor agreements, third-party agreements, operating costs. So what we wanted to try to do is, we are not going to be able to answer all of those questions in the report, but we can draw out where some of those decisions would need to be made, or how some of those decisions would need to be made, to provide clarification on both options, about kind of what those next steps would entail, things that would need to be considered. So we're going to try to provide some more information about both options, and what would need to be considered as people move forward with debate on those. Again, we're going to be receiving more comments through today. Hopefully, again, we're going to be able to compile those. And then within that October 4th submittal to the board and MPO, we will detail what has been changed. And then we'll describe some of that at the October 11th meeting, again, in hopes for a final vote. I think one of the other things I will mention that we also heard about clarification is, what are people voting on? Again, I think it's key for this group to understand we are not asking for, as Amy said, we understand there's still disagreement and some thoughts about each one pieces of the report, and we are not asking for a full approval of everything in the report. We're asking for authorization to submit this to the Governor and General Assembly as accordance with the Act, in order for further discussion and deliberation to happen at the General Assembly. So that is the motion that we are going to be hopeful to put forward through our board. And then we understand, right, there's going to be another deliberative legislative process that, again, we would like to act as advisors, continue to have some analysis to some of the things that we've recommended. Now I'm putting on my legislative hat versus my part hat. We do anticipate that there'll be discussions throughout 2024 session, and then possible action in 2025 of different things. Again, if anybody can tell you what the legislature is going to do, you've got a wonderful crystal ball, but we'll continue to work through, with our legislative sponsors, advocates, organizations, as we look in the next 2 years, so that this can be addressed before the fiscal cliff in 2026. I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Laura. You can kick us off, Tara.
Thank you, Laura. Just a clarification on the schedule, looking to anticipate receiving the revised report. You said that's October 4th.
Yeah, so by our processes here at CMAP, we need to submit it by October 4th, so a week before board and MPO. If we can get it completed faster, we will send it out early. But by October 4th, we will definitely submit it to board and MPO.
Well, I just want to say thank you, because looking at my calendar, that gives you 7 business days to turn around all of these comments. So thank you. And we'll use all 7 days up until that next meeting. But thank you to all of the CMAP staff for this Herculean effort for turning that updated report around.
Yes, Chris.
Just want to echo what Tara said, and that is just thanking CMAP staff for the tremendous outreach you did, and the accessibility, whether it was staff, my chair, and so many others. And so I'm using this as a segue to something else. So those that don't know, I retired November 3rd after 36 years. And as I contemplated my retirement, it was going to be the spring. And then someone says, well, we have, your budget's due in June. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't leave for a budget. And I said, I'll leave end of summer. And then part was ongoing. And I saw how my county board chair became more and more immersed in it. And I said, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't leave yet. So I said, I'll get through the vote, October 11th. I'll leave that Friday, which is Friday the 13th. And I said, well, you don't retire on Friday the 13th. So I decided I'll retire November 3rd. So that'll be my last day. This is my last transportation committee meeting. I started, when I was at Cook County, I started when this was CATS, and we would get together. We talked about a lot more technical stuff, right? I remember a conversation about ramp queue jumping. Didn't know what that was, but it seemed like something cool. And now we have a much larger group. It's not just implementers, but it's implementers and it's partners and advocates. And so I think it's evolved more policy, and I've enjoyed it. I'm going to miss this. I may be sitting over there with my good friend John Yonan watching and the like. But you know, COVID changed a lot of things, and I'm glad to see that we're all back together, because it's these kind of meetings and being in person that, again, you get to reflect on, you know, what we do as a region. And I'm proud of my career, proud of what the region has done. And so thank you.
We can come up with another project that's due next year, Chris, if you.
Right. Thanks, Chris. And yeah, there can be some spots back there for the retired county engineers. We can do CMAP staff, county engineers back there in the corner, and yeah, pull the chairs out. So no, any other questions, comments for Laura? Discussion.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Laura. All right. Item 6, legislative update. No legislative update today, but CMF staff is available. If we have any questions or comments or discussion items. Seeing nothing, moving on to item 8.0, public comments. Does anybody from the audience wish to address the committee today? Excuse me, skipped over other business. Item 7.0, other business. Any other business that committee members like to bring up?
Sure.
Yes.
So on behalf of the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, we are interested in speaking to you about electric vehicles. For, as I don't have to tell all of you, but there are a number of federal opportunities right now, right? Just this week alone, in the last 2 days, the state has received $50 million for things like grid hardening and other energy storage types, right? There was a really cool study looking at hydrogen storage. So things like this. Illinois EPA just put out a call for $27 million for school buses, electric school buses. And we unfortunately received only 11 million of applications, right? That's not ideal. So I will be reaching out to probably all of you. You'll hear from me when various applications come out. The US EPA is going to have their latest school bus rebate round coming out probably next week, something like that. So if you talk with any of your education partners, please let them know that there is money for electric school buses. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Scott.
Just an update for the group, something of relevance to the region. On Tuesday night, McHenry County Board approved an increase to our county option motor fuel tax from 4.7 cents to 8 cents per gallon. Obviously, that's going to help us accelerate our 5-year program that we have. I mentioned to Kyle a lot of that going to our bridge program that's growing every year. So again, just kind of an update for the group, just something to keep an eye on with our corner of the region, what we're doing up there.
Thanks, Scott. Yep. Yeah.
If I can put my academic research role out and wear my hat for the Port District. There is a Port District in Chicago, by the way. I sit on the board of the Port District, and my executive director was wondering if he can come in and make a presentation to inform the committee about the port's activities. You guys may have seen the Tribune editorials of late. So
yeah, I guess I'll prefer to see that staff whenever.
Yes, of course. We'll work to get that on a future agenda.
Right. Any other business? I guess I'll just stay here too. You know, with Chris announcing his retirement here on the floor, you know, kudos to him, and I really appreciate. Hope I can speak for everybody, but he's been a big part of this region. I know huge influence in DuPage County, but throughout the region too, and here at CMAP, and been a really big voice. Yeah, he's kind of a big deal. But no, he's been great. I started out here coming to some of these meetings back in 2016, 17. Remember him talking about payment management and everything. He's really been a good proponent in this, you know, just looking out for the region, not only just his county. So kudos, Chris, and best wishes in retirement. So. All right. Now on to public comment. Does anyone from the audience wish to address the committee today? Have any comments? Seeing none. If you're online, please notify staff by using the raise your hand function. So let us know if you have any questions online. Do we have any, Kama?
We do.
Good morning. It's Garland Armstrong, formerly of Des Plaines, now living in Des Moines, Iowa. How you doing, everybody?
Good morning, Garland. How you doing?
All right. I just want to give kudos to Chris Snyder for him because he has done an awesome job. And Chris, you hit the grand slam of moving on because you have really rocked it, my man. So me and Heather would like to give kudos to you. And I hope one day you could come out here and see Iowa as a great retirement vacation for you because you deserve it, my man. And we hope that one day we could bump into each other. So kudos to you from me and Heather to you and want to say, way to go. And also too, I'm deeply concerned here in Des Moines, the DART, Des Moines Area Regional Transit Authority, they had the electric bus, but it's no longer running in service because the manufacturers went filed for bankruptcy. And I'm deeply concerned about CTA and PACE. And if they have a backup plan, if the manufacturers for the electric bus file for bankruptcy, will PACE and CTA have a backup plan just in case if the manufacturers file for bankruptcy? Because that's the hardest part of them all. When people hear that word bankruptcy, what's the next step going to be? So I just would like to know if there's any comments from CTA or PACE about that, if that ever happens down the road, because that is my biggest concern. So in future references, so if they are extremely well prepared for it, because this is really what, when I hear that word bankruptcy, that really makes me want to say what's happening right now, where the electric bus is at, and none of them in service, and the manufacturers file for bankruptcy, and I want to know what's going on. So if there's any comments or questions from CTA, if that ever happens down the road, what's the next backup plan going to be, or the next steps going to be? And I'll be glad to answer any questions or comments from any of them.
Thanks, Garland. From PACE's perspective, we're following the developments of Proterra's bankruptcy filing to see what the outcomes of that process might be. There are limited bus manufacturers for battery electric buses, so it's certainly something we're concerned about. But at this point, we just need to see what the next steps are in terms of where Proterra goes and what other companies may come to the table to provide that type of vehicle.
Oh, and Garland, this is Mike Connolly from CTA, and we are doing the same thing. We're following very closely. We have an order of 22 buses with that manufacturer that's in bankruptcy court right now. We've hired a bankruptcy attorney to appear in Delaware bankruptcy court to protect our interests with that order. So we're working with the manufacturer, and hopefully we'll be able to get those buses that are on order. At the same time, as Eric said, there are other manufacturers, and we're looking at the other manufacturers to see what's the best direction for us to go with our next bus order, because we have intentions of ordering many more buses that are electric. So I'm glad to hear that you're concerned about it. I'm sorry to hear that your buses out there in Iowa aren't operating now. Ours are, that we have, and we're just exploring all options to get more.
Thanks, Mike and Eric, because that's the biggest concern. Bankruptcy is the most important of all, and with no electric buses here that is not running, that's my biggest main concern, because when I saw it, it was great, but I hope it won't happen to y'all down the road.
Great. Thank you, Garland. Appreciate the comments. Enjoy. Have fun out there in Iowa. Have a good weekend.
You too.
All right. Looks like there's nothing else online. Doug does have a written email comment that we received.
Yeah, we received one comment in advance of the meeting.
Good morning, CMAP Transportation Committee Chair Kevin Carrier, fellow committee members and CMAP staff. My name is John Paul Jones, Nature Trail Consultant with Grow Greater Englewood. Today, we are here to witness staff recommendations for the federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 Locally Preferred Transportation Alternative Program, TAP-L. We are most pleased to see the Englewood Nature Trail, described as the Englewood Line Trail, recommended for program funding increase. Also, Grow Greater Englewood appreciates that CMAP supported the public request to front load funding of the Englewood Nature Trail from 2024 to or from 2025 to 2024. Getting dollars out the door in a more expedient manner brings added hope to public-private partnerships across the region, more importantly, keeping Chicago working. We wish to share with the Transportation Committee our local excitement with the continued progress with the historic Green Line Racine Station. The CTA continues to respond to the public's request to find funds towards reopening of our local station. The CTA board was recently awarded federal funding to study the feasibility of reopening the historic Racine Station. This funding will allow for a more broader discussion on regional competitiveness, accessibility, and poverty elimination. To this end, thank you for your collective leadership, and we always look forward to sharing ideas and information with your working committee.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for the comment. All right, with that, the next meeting we have coming up is November 17th, 2023. So look forward to seeing you all then. And I guess it's time for adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Chris? And a second and a third. All right, second by Jack. All in favor? Any opposed? Awesome. Have a good weekend, everyone.